Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's Wendy Sellers, the HR lady. We are here today to talk about some really exciting information with our expert guest calling in from Ontario, Canada, Katy McFee. Hi, Katy. How you doing?
I'm great, Wendy. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So you are an executive coach and the founder of Insights to Action. I hear that you help high-performing women finally break through their director to VP ceiling. Ooh, this is going to be a juicy, juicy session. So you have 18-year career in biotech and tech. Wow, that is amazing, especially as a woman. I cannot wait to hear about this. Tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today professionally.
Yeah. So I started my career in biotech. I mean, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but I kind of stumbled into biotech sales. Luckily, I was good at it. And I spent 15 years there, sort of trying to climb the ladder, and then moving into tech. And a big reason I'm where I am today is that I really struggled in my career journey. I always like to say, like, for me, this was not a rocket to the top. And in a way, that was a blessing because it allowed me to get really obsessed with what makes someone executive material, right? Why are some people seen as ready and some people aren't? And when I decided to finally leave my corporate career and start my business, I was like, this is something I can help people with because I've probably thought about this more than anyone on the planet. And the reason why was I was stuck as a director for 5 years trying to land that VP role, really doing largely the job of a VP. There was no one above me. And I just couldn't get that VP title. I kept being told, you're not strategic enough. You're just not there yet. And that is the same place I see a lot of people get stuck and they fall into a lot of the same traps I did. And so I'm very passionate about closing the gender gap we see in senior leadership. And I'm like, okay, the way that I can do this is to help more women land that first time VP role and really thrive there.
I love it. Absolutely love what you're doing. We all are in this together, male or
Yep.
female, but definitely we females need to stick together. And in the workplace, we're still fighting for our own seat at the table. So my first question is, really about the question of why performance isn't enough. You've said the real barrier to advancement wasn't performance, it's perception. Ooh, why
Yep.
do high performing women misunderstand how promotions to VP actually happen?
Yeah. Well, I think this comes down to the fact that early in our careers, we are rewarded from being great executors, right? So we work super hard, we put up our hand, do all the extra stuff, sign up for the extra committee, take on the extra training, all of that kind of stuff. And that gets us raises, it gets us praise, and it often gets us promoted to that first level of leadership. And I think that there's also some sort of underlying conditioning, whereas women, we like to be pleasers, we like to make people happy. And when we're working 10 times harder than everyone else and we are handing in perfect work product, people like that, right? And so this creates, some positive reinforcement in us where we believe like this is how I add value, right? This is my currency. And we end up taking that with us because that's what has worked for us for so long. And this was absolutely the case for me, by the way. I was a great executor. I got tons of stuff done. But what I noticed was that as I moved into manager roles and VP and director level roles, suddenly that wasn't enough. Like I was doing that. I was doing all the extra. I was working 10 times harder than everyone else. And I was not being seen as ready. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with skill or knowledge. It has to do with our behaviors and the perceptions those are creating. And so what we can be doing is we can unintentionally be creating the perception we're not ready for that next level. Because if you look at somebody and they're running meeting to meeting all day, they answer
Yes.
Slack messages in 30 seconds, they're, crossing 100 things off their to-do list. Do you look at that person and say, oh yeah, they're a great strategic leader? No,
Right.
right? You're like they're a high performing executor. And you again, you might be getting praised for that, but you're not being seen as the right as the person for that next level. And so we kind of have to stop and ask ourselves, what is the perception that I am creating through the way I'm showing up in my job?
Yeah, and I would even say that this is excellent advice for men too, right?
For
Regardless
sure.
of any orientation or gender identity. But the facts are, I have some stats here. Women only hold approximately 29% of senior leadership roles in the US, and that's from McKinsey and Company. And then there's another stat that said for every 100 men promoted to a manager, not even VP, a manager, only 87 women are promoted.
Yeah.
Ugh, ugh, ugh.
Yeah. Well, and that's really important because for years and years, we talked about the glass ceiling.
Right,
And what the Women in the Workplace report that you're referring to points out is that this happens a lot earlier than the
right,
glass ceiling, right? When you picture the glass ceiling, you picture all these women climbing up, and then there's this like final level they can't get through. But the truth is, and they refer to it as the broken rung, this happens at every single level of promotion. And so yes, in that very first level of promotion, we're seeing 87 women promoted for every 100 men, and it's worse for women of color, by the way. But then once you get up to those senior leadership roles, now suddenly we are less than 30%. And it's because that
yikes.
compounds with each promotion. And it is a problem that we need to fix. When I think about, you made a great point that that's great advice for men too. I always tell people like the stuff I teach is actually great for men and women. I
Right.
just choose to work with women because I want to help to close this gap. And so as opposed to thinking about, how do we navigate bias or what are all the problems we're facing? I'm like, these things are real, but my goal is to make people such a great executive. Like, I want to give people an unfair advantage by teaching them how to just show up as such a killer executive that they're going to get the role. Gender, whatever their gender is, whatever their orientation is, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so I love that you teach ambitious women how to master executive presence, communicate with authority, and build environments where their leadership thrives. My question, going from, first of all, you got to get into the management space, as we just said, but now if you've actually been able to go from manager to director, you hit the ceiling going from director to VP, as we just discussed. What specifically changes, though, at the director to VP level that causes so many very capable women to stall out?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's a question I asked myself for a long time. And what it really comes down to is your focus needs to shift from primarily execution to primarily strategic initiatives at that level. So when you think about it, okay, you come into your very first job, you're an individual contributor, and you're given the playbook. It's like, this is what you need to do. This is exactly how you need to hit your goals, and you just do it, right? If you execute well, you are probably going to succeed at those levels. Once you step into a manager role, we think that that's so different because, well, now I'm a leader. But the truth is, it's actually very similar in the sense that you are still primarily executing. You're given the playbook, and instead of you hitting those goals, you have to help your team hit the goals, right? So you have to motivate them, you have to track their metrics, all that kind of stuff. But you're still primarily in execution mode. Once you move into a director level role and then a VP level role, as you move up, this happens more and more, you need to start focusing more on strategic initiatives. So that might be, instead of just running a process at a director level, noticing this process is broken, we need to fix it. This is my recommendation. Or, hey, I'm managing this team, but like, I actually think we need to tweak this org structure. So I find at a director level, you might be taking strategy and then translating that into an executable plan, but that in and of itself requires some strategic ability.
Right.
And you also need to be able to course correct, I find at that level, right? So you don't just blindly follow. Like you're expected now to be critically thinking and course correcting. And then once you're at the VP level, you need to be like developing and owning strategies. And so no one really tells you that. This is the thing. I'm like, it's like the best kept secret where no one ever sits you down and says, okay, now that you're in a director level role, this is what we want to see. This is how you need to spend your time. We're kind of expected to just know. And so a lot of us get stuck because we're like, well, I've never done this before.
Right.
Right? Like I've always been doing the same thing and it's always worked for me. And now suddenly that's not enough. And we don't know why. We don't know what we need to do differently. And even if we did, a lot of us just don't even know how.
I have so much to add here and questions to ask, So first of all, I've seen many companies that they just promote somebody from a manager to a director to VP, but they really just changed the title and gave them more money. And so they're still doing the actual tasks and then the management and the director and the VP, and then they're burnt out, right? And then they
Yeah.
wonder, well, gee, well, I gave you the promotion. Well, yes, you gave me the promotion, but you didn't allow me to build a team to delegate my former tasks to so that I can now focus on strategy. So that's the number one thing that I see a lot of companies of all sizes, but definitely small companies that are growing and, are still trying to hang on to their staff and saying, okay, we want to build you and we're just going to keep promoting you, but now you got to work 80 hours instead of 60 or 45, or yeah, as if we ever work less than that. But I hear what you're saying. You have to build a team, delegate tasks, and then move on to focus on strategy. So in the situation like where I just described, or any situation really, how does a female or anyone really say, I want to move on to strategy and really prove to the company, yeah, we need to hire more people, which is going to cost you more
Yeah.
money. But in the end, we could focus on strategy and stop putting out fires and, make sure we're building an actual foolproof plan.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So one is you need to get really serious about where you should focus your time, right? Like at a certain point, there might be certain things that you just don't do anymore. Like they just don't get done. And as women, often we're not okay with that.
Right. I was,
We're
I was just thinking
perfectionists.
that.
Yeah, we're pleasers. And so it's funny because I just ran a workshop today on delegation and I had people categorize things into four categories: own, delegate, automate or streamline, and decline or stop. And so there's not like there's just two options. It's not just own and delegate. There is oftentimes the option to implement a tool, streamline a process. Like, can you get creative if your organization doesn't have enough money for you to hire a whole team? Or are there things that you just stop doing because you're like, you know what, this is not a good use of my time. And so getting really serious about that, I think, is important, and it's good for it's important if you don't want to burn out, right? As you're moving into these more senior level
Right.
roles. So getting really serious about being able to prioritize, delegate, know what to focus on, all of those are key. Now, if you believe you need to hire a team under you, and I see this all the time, people get promoted up, they don't have a strong level of leadership under them. And so they're still like managing lots of junior people and like, there's a lot of chaos happening. And so oftentimes we need to make the case to either hire a team or to build out a level of leadership under us. And this is where, again, you need to be strategic in terms of what kind of business case are you creating. I see people do this all the time where they put together a case where they're like, we're all too busy, so I need to hire people. And I'm always like, that's not compelling. Like, that's not a compelling business case. Like, I'm sorry you're
Yep.
busy. And so I always challenge the women I work with to say, okay, if you tell me you're busy, so what? They're like, well, people are going to burn out. So what? And I really push them to get to what is the crux of the problem here. And so once you start to frame it as we need to hire more people because, the morale is low, we're going to lose people, or this project is at risk or whatever, essentially you're starting to frame things in terms of trade-offs instead of problems. And that is where you start to communicate as an executive and you're more likely to get what you want. Okay, so that's one thing in terms of creating the business case. And then finally, let's just say you're in a situation, you're at a startup, you're in a VP role, but you have no team. You're going to be building them out, but you can't do it for 6 months. And like in this season, you are both doing the doing and also having to be the strategic leader. Sometimes this happens. This happens with women I work with all the time. In this case, I'm like, time blocking is your friend. Do not ignore the strategic work because that's what we tend to do. We're like, I'm just going to do all this stuff. and then you're not showing up as a VP and maybe someone gets hired above you or whatever, right? So you don't want that to happen. But I always say, like, even if you can block out a single 2 hour deep work block time in your week, every single week, protect that 2 hour block, you're going to get ahead. You're doing more than actually a lot of people are doing. So I really recommend, if you're in that situation and you can't possibly hire people, use time blocking and
I
be,
myself use time blocking, and
yeah,
it saves my sanity. Gives me a little anxiety sometimes when I see what I put on my schedule for the next 3 days. And then I've learned to give myself a little bit of grace. A little secret that I also learned is when you block those 2 hours out, it's almost always going to take 3 or 4 hours. So I just block the 3 or 4 out now. And if I get it done ahead of time, I'm like, ooh, I could actually
yeah.
have a sit down meal today.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a big fan of that too, right? Like I was absolutely the person where I'd be like texting my partner, like, chuck a granola bar in the room. I don't have time to eat. I was, back to back, meeting to meeting, never took lunch. And this is something I've really changed actually. Um, and it has been game changing where, like, I have a morning routine in the morning. I make myself a proper meal at lunch and sit down and eat it. I often will go for a walk after that. Not at this time of year because it's just too dang cold, but like, I do these things and it actually helps me show up as a better leader because I'm able to think. I'm not like, I'm not stressed to the max. I'm able to
Right.
actually, you know, generate ideas and think proactively and that kind of thing. So a lot of the message that I share with people is like, slow down to speed up. If you
Yep.
can do that, and because oftentimes when I talk to women, they're like, okay, Katy, you've told me like a million times to block out deep work time, but I let people block over it, or I just don't have time to do it this week. And I get it, right? I get it. But the truth is, in the long run, it's going to save you time. It's going to ensure you're focused on the right things. It's going to help your career trajectory. Like, it might be the best 2 hours you spend every single week.
Right. And then on top of that, if there's certain things that you're saying, you know what, as you were just referring to, that you need to stop doing because you're like, this is not strategic. This is not going to, help the bottom line. This is not going to help the mission vision of the company. If somebody else on the executive team comes to you and says, I want that back, whatever it is, you send out emails like, that's great. I'm gonna need to hire somebody, even if it's a temp, a 1099, a contractor, a consultant
Yeah.
to do that. Is it more important that I do that, or is it more important that I do this over here? And I see that a lot too, that women particularly don't push back to say, well, okay, I'll just stay late to get that done. Versus, no, this is what we agreed my role's going to be. And you have to kind of start proving that I need more help. And the only
Yeah.
way to do that is to maybe leave things undone. Hopefully, they're not so important, but
Yeah, well, and I think you want to be able to justify it, right? Like, if you
yep,
really understand the company level priorities, key KPIs, then you should be willing to defend the decision that you made. Hey, I'm prioritizing this, this, and this because these ladder up to this key initiative that's really important for our company's success. I'm not doing these administrative things. I don't have the bandwidth. We don't have the resources within the organization. Is this important long term? Perhaps. And if so, like, my recommendation is that we build out this, layer in the team. However, in the meantime, I'm focused on the things that are really going to move the needle. And people are going to actually appreciate that. And I
yeah,
mean, to your point, you can get creative. Like, I worked at an organization that was chronically under-resourced. We never had enough funding. Like, it's tough in biotech in particular because it takes so much money to get products out. And so if you're not like really well funded, then you can find yourself in a situation where it's like you just have no money. And the blessing in that is that I was forced to ask myself, like, what is the one thing we can do that is going to have the biggest impact? That's going to have an outsized impact compared to everything else because we just can't do it all.
right.
And I also got really good at doing things like figuring out how to utilize co-op students, right? Which were government subsidized and like basically very cheap or free, and implementing tools and all that kind of stuff because sometimes the answer is more people. Sometimes the answer is not more people.
Right.
right? If you look at
Right.
those diagrams you see with the communication lines, the more people you get and the more complex it gets. Um, it tells a really good story. And so throwing people at the problem is not always what we want to do, but we do want to get creative in terms of we don't want to be doing it all ourselves because that's just not
Right.
practical.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of circle back around and talk, a little bit more just about the presence part. When you work with these ambitious women who are stuck and they're not able to move on to the VP role, what are the most common executive presence mistakes that hold them back from being seen as VP ready?
Yeah, so there's a couple that I'll call out. The first one is I'm going to say stakeholder mapping and relationship building with the right people. Oftentimes we work hard with our head down and we're not spending a lot of time on building relationships with key stakeholders. And part B of that is we're not doing things like socializing ideas ahead of meetings, right? And these are the things that are going to help you. If you think about getting promoted to that next level, oftentimes it is not a decision that your boss is making in isolation.
Right.
Oftentimes they have to get buy-in from the rest of the leadership team. If no one knows who you are or what you do, or they have not been able to see your value in action, are they going to support that? Right? So actually carving out time to ask yourself, who are the key stakeholders in this organization or even outside the organization, maybe like sponsors or mentors that you want to stay in touch with. What is my relationship like with them today? And what do I need to do in order for them to see me as a valuable leader? The second thing is communication style. Oh my gosh, communication style is so important for executive presence because people judge us so much on the way we communicate. I often say to the women I work with, I'm like, the way you frame an idea can be even more important than the idea itself.
Right.
That's how powerful it is. And so, like in the program that I do, I spend an entire session just on framing and communication. And this comes down to I talk about the three C's: clear, concise, and compelling communication. But at the root of it is oftentimes that we're not spending enough time preparing for key conversations, for
Mhm.
meetings where we're going to be highly visible. And as a result, we ramble, we're all over the place instead of organizing the information. And so the cognitive load for our listener is high and they just don't get the value out of what we're sharing.
Right.
And we don't share things in a compelling way in the sense that we are connecting them to ROI or to company level strategic
Bingo.
initiatives. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
100%. And it's so important because, many companies, right, wrong, or indifferent, they just care about money. And but let's face it, if we don't have the money, we can't keep the company open, whether it's a private company, a public company, a nonprofit, we still need the money. And so
yep.
that's another point too, is I encourage, and I'm sure you do too, women, people in general who are looking for promotions to understand what is the ROI for that company that you're working with. What is the revenue focus? There's a difference between revenue and profit, and not everybody understands that. I personally didn't understand it for the longest time. I was just like, show me the money. And I was like, oh, finally, a boss who cared was like, okay, I need to show you like what a P&L statement is and how our
Mhm.
finances. I was like, I hate numbers, get away from me. But it really made me realize that even, as the director of HR at the time, that okay, what I was asking for the people, whether it was my team or the entire company, it didn't fit in the revenue. So something else, I wasn't giving up. Something else had to go, right? Or be
Yes.
adjusted. And so, we all need to, the beauty of today, 2026, is that there's so many opportunities to be educated, including on our platform that we're talking on here, the Aurora Training Advantage platform. And you could 100% lean in personally and start getting educated on, everything from revenue to how a business runs and hiring and all of that. So my other question is here really about, well, let me restate this too. I had a statistic here. We were talking about executive presence. um there was a study by Center for Talent Innovation that found that executive presence accounts for 26% of what it takes to get promoted. So making sure that not only your boss, I hate that word by the way, but not just your boss knows who you are and what you do, but other people do too. So shaking the hands, kissing the babies, rubbing the elbows, making sure they know what you're about, right?
Absolutely. It is so important. And executive presence is one of those terms that can sound really sort of like vague and elusive. And I'm always like, it's just like it's a set of traits and skills that anyone can learn, right? And when I think about it, it comes down to communication, it comes down to relationships, often like integrity, our character, right? And so these are all things that sort of ladder up to our executive presence. But communication is if I were to pick out one, it would be communication because when we communicate, you can have a conversation with someone and be like, yeah, they're a VP or they're not, right? And so as whether that's fair or not, this is
Yeah.
how people make decisions. And oftentimes when we communicate in a way that is intentional and compelling, we are seen as someone who's ready for that next level.
Yeah, it's connecting it to what the business mission, vision, and even values
Yeah.
are. But really, like, what are our goals? Why are we here? And how can I, whoever I am, help get you there? What
Yeah.
strategy needs to change? Which brings me to my final question, since most of our listeners are wearing the HR hat. From an HR perspective, what changes need to happen inside organizations to ensure that high performing women aren't overlooked for executive roles?
Oh, such a great question. There is that stat you've probably heard before. Men are promoted on potential, women are promoted on experience. And so being just really aware of that subconscious bias that may exist, I think is important. Ensuring that the candidate pool is balanced as people are being considered for promotions. I think that's really important as well. And the third thing would be to identify some of these rising stars and ensure that they have development, right? Training, support, whatever, because it has been shown that women do receive less training development than our male counterparts. And oftentimes we also have fewer mentors and sponsors just because of, oh, sorry, that's actually a lie. We have fewer sponsors. We often
Yes.
have more mentors because everyone likes to tell
Yes.
us what to do. We have fewer sponsors, and sponsors are the ones who are opening the door. And so, knowing that we're at that disadvantage, it's like, okay, how else can we help women? If they're not going to have sponsors, if they're not going to have people taking them by the hand, being like, this is what you need to do. I'm going to open up these opportunities for you. How can we start to sort of level the playing field? And so, I always say, if you can provide development opportunities for these women, knowing that yeah, we need to learn how to step into these more strategic roles. It might be less natural for us to slow down because of our people pleasing tendencies or whatever. That I think is really important as well. Just setting people up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. So, HR folks that are listening, please make sure that you develop hopefully formal sponsorship programs. Deloitte says that companies with formal sponsorship programs see higher retention. Don't we all want that? And faster promotion rates among women and other underrepresented leaders. And then another statistic that I found from Harvard Business Review about sponsorships is that women are less likely than men to have senior leader sponsors. Yet
Hmm.
employees, as you mentioned, with those sponsors are more likely to advance. In fact, 23% more likely. And so please, listeners, sell this upwards. Talk about money, talk about revenue. And I'm just going to throw one more stat out here. It was from the McKinsey Diversity Wins report and said that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on the executive teams are 25% more likely to outperform their competition financially. That alone, every CFO should be going, hello, let me lean into that, right?
There's so much data. It is like irrefutable at this point. There's so much data demonstrating that when you have more women and diversity on your leadership team, it performs better.
It really does. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Katy McFee, You are amazing. I love your mission. It's so simple. Empower women to own their value, lead with confidence, and get the promotions they've earned. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, if you liked what I had to say, if you want more of this, you can check me out on LinkedIn. I post there every single day. So definitely go give me a follow. I also have my own podcast called More Women Promoted, which, spoiler alert, is about helping more women get promoted. So you can head over there and check out some of those episodes.
Awesome. I'll make sure her LinkedIn link is in the podcast notes. And by the way, speaking of women, I wanted to share that we at Aurora Training Advantage have a webinar session for the EEOC's pregnancy compliance coming up. So check that out. Feel free to share this and listen to this podcast on YouTube, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, or directly on the Aurora Training Advantage website. Thank you so much for all this amazing information, Katy. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun.
Awesome. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.